Hello? I can barely hear you right now. It sounds important, but are you going through a tunnel? I can't hear you. Oh, hello, friends. No wonder why I can't hear anything. This is a tuner. Silly me. All right, enough of the weirdness. It's officially tune time on this car, and if you've been following along for a while now, you know it's been one thing after another. I keep telling myself I'm going to tune this car, but today is officially the day. And now before I show you exactly how we're going to input this tune onto the car with this not old school looking phone, but a handheld tuner, let me show you what it actually took to get to this point. Here it is. For starters, this, of course, if you've been following along, my 2008 Saab 9.3 Aero, 2.8 liter V6. It's the B284, of course, the turbo, and then it's backed by a F46 speed transmission. Love this combo. Now, as far as modifications, the little tiny factory 15T turbo was replaced with the high flow 22T from BC Innovate. Also have these beautiful DO88 intercooler and intake pipes hidden, tucked in here. Sort of looking OEM when you can see it is a Evo 8 intercooler in the back, which of course you're not going to be able to see, is a custom fuel pump situation going on. It's using an AM50 to 1000 fuel pump. Just installed the Bosch 700cc injectors underneath this intake plenum. Also have a catless downpipe and mid-pipe tucked away in here from my friends at Prolific Builds. And then lastly is a muffler delete and recently a secondary air injection system delete with the block-off plate from BC Innovate. So this is the mods. There is, of course, an upgraded clutch. That was done by the previous owner, so I'm not entirely sure what exactly it is, but it's a pretty stiff one, and hopefully it'll hold up to the power once we get this thing tuned. And then the last thing I'd like to mention is the fact that some of this stuff was ceramic coated, the DO88 charge pipes. This intake is the most recent addition to the ceramic coating, as well as a hidden downpipe in there, also being ceramic coated. So now you know what mods are on the car. Now it's officially time to get this thing tuned. Here's the magic. Well, I guess realistically the magic is in the tuner itself, the man behind this. So this came from Brian at Vermont Tuning, or better known as VTune, and basically you give them all the information you want. This is a custom tune based on my Frankenstein cobbled up modifications. You can go with their specific upgrade kits. There's like a stage 2, stage 2 plus, stage 0, so on and so forth. Well, this being literally a cobbled up upgraded system here, I'm going with a custom tune. So what we're going to do is we're going to upload the custom tune that Brian put on this little fancy handheld tuner, which is very simple. And then we'll go ahead, once everything is loaded onto the vehicle, we select one of the tunes and upload it, of course. We're going to need to data log and make sure everything is A-OK, and then transfer that via email to Brian so he can work out any quirks or any adjustments. Got the OBD2 end on here. We'll just hook it up to the diagnostic port of the vehicle. Now we got to get the key in the ignition, turn it to the on position. We'll go ahead and start by going to the Tune tool. Go to Program Calibration. So here you can see the tunes that are loaded up onto here. Now, because this is my daily driver, and I really only have access to 91 octane right by where I live, for now I'm going to start with that. There it is. It's now tuned. So it is another day, actually multiple weeks later. I ended up rolling this thing out of the garage and it stopped right there, and I struggled to get this thing running, and I thought the absolute worst, to where I created an intake leak whenever I was doing the injector install and putting everything back together. I cleaned everything as best as possible, but I thought the absolute worst, that I would have to tear apart this again to redo the injector install with new gaskets, or maybe a folded over gasket. I wasn't quite sure because I couldn't get the car running. Well, after a little bit of diagnosing, I realized there's 3 tune settings on that little handheld tuner, 2 of which were dumping way too much fuel into this engine where it didn't like it. So the 3rd and final tune, which I believe was like a 93 octane one, actually made the car run pretty darn good. Now, because it was having so much trouble on the other 2 tunes, I know for a fact these plugs are very well fouled, and I am actually experiencing a misfire on cylinder 5, which is the back. Now, if you're new to this, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you have 2, 4, 6, 1, 3, 5. The 5th one back here, which is the most buried one with all this junk behind there, well, that's the coil that's giving me some issues. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and throw some new plugs in here. I have a set of brand new Denso spark plugs ready to go into the car. Well, almost. But these were recommended by the tuner. Denso plugs 5345 is the number, or you may be able to find it by the IKH22. Now, my local auto parts store did not have these in stock, but I was able to get them relatively quickly online. Now, a big myth and misconception is that you cannot gap iridium spark plugs like these. And iridiums, you can see the very fine tip to it. Well, that is in fact a myth. It's just you cannot gap them with a traditional style spark plug gapper. You want to use what's called a feeler gauge. I'm sure there's multiple names for this particular tool, but I call it a feeler gauge. Now, my particular tuner is recommending a 0.80 millimeter to a 0.85 millimeter gap. I spec these out of the box. They are a 0.75. So what we need to do is open up the ground strap here a little bit more. And how we're going to do that is very carefully with a set of needle nose pliers. If it's too big of a gap, well, we have this old block of wood, and we'll just ever so gracefully tap it back down a little bit till this feeler gauge has a little bit of resistance to it, but not too much. Now, a traditional style copper platinum or a double platinum has a very wide electrode right here, and that's what you can use this traditional style spark plug gapper with. But when it comes to an iridium plug like these, where it's got that fine tip, you will most certainly damage it by using that. So just use this method of opening it up with some needle nose pliers and using a feeler gauge. All 6 now ready to go into the car. Have the new plugs installed. Coils are installed as well. The number 5 coil I swapped with number 6. That way, this was an intermittent issue when it was number 5. So if it carries over to cylinder 6 being an intermittent issue, then I can easily replace this. Now I do have a giant pile of coils in that bin, but it's been a long time since I've purchased any new coils, so I may just do a round of new coils, but we shall see. So unfortunately I did have one casualty, and that is this vacuum solenoid of sorts right here. Now this goes right in place in here, and you can kind of see right there where it connects into this piece right there, and it sits just like this down in there. And what this is for is it connects to the power brake booster, which is somewhere in here, which is way down in here. And then the vacuum lines travel along, tees off, and then goes down over here. And on my US spec car, in the passenger side wheel well, is that brake vacuum assist pump, which is unique to the 2.8 liter V6s. So unfortunately this did break. I mean, it's pretty old, brittle plastic, moving about, all this stuff. There's not a lot of space in here, so unfortunately that did break. But actually pretty surprising, I was able to get this off rockauto.com for relatively cheap. So I got a new one ordered. It's been a couple days, but we officially have the replacement for this brake vacuum hose. Again, this is the original one that broke. Fortunately, just due to age, plastic became brittle, and this end where another hose goes onto sheared straight off. Here's a replacement, an authentic General Motors part number right up top there. This I got from rockauto.com, and it was actually surprisingly reasonable with all things considered, being an original part and the fact that some of the stuff is way more expensive than it needs to be. So I'm going to fast track the process of reinstallation of that new pipe down in that cubby. There's also a bunch of 10mm bolts, including that ECU bracket, that need to go back on and tighten down. So I'll catch you up to speed when everything is back together and the car's ready to run. So far it's running pretty good, just idling. Definitely needs some fine tuning, which is what the purpose of the data logging is. But I need to check for any misfires, swap any coils if need be, and then we can go ahead and data log. All right, so as far as monitoring the ignition stuff via my Tech 2 here, definitely noticed some misfires. You can see right now, cylinder 3, 4, 5, and then depending on how the throttle is, 5 will pop up, it'll jump up. And then when I back off the throttle, I can definitely feel the car kind of lurching a little bit, and then I'll start counting a few more misfires. So I'm gonna data log. I'll send the file off to Brian at Vermont. Now, there could be something he can tweak with the fueling, but because the coils are so notorious to go out on these cars, more than likely, I'm looking at a full coil set replacement, which is to be expected because I think I've only replaced 1 or 2 coils in the time of ownership with this car, which is over 3 years now. So it's kind of one of those things to be expected, but I'll see what Brian says and go from there. The Vermont Tuning handheld scanner is now reattached to the car, and what we're gonna do is data log. So we need to go to Scan Tool, we need to go to Record Data, vehicle is already running, and right now it is starting its thing. Now we gotta give it some time before we start, and here it's apparent nothing is really happening because it's not registering on the scanner. So we'll give it a little bit of time. All right, here you can see now the timer is still counting, but now you have the frames and it's registering some other values here. So now we're good to set this to the side, drive around for a bit. We're gonna do some mixed driving, some in town, some highway, and a couple pulls. Unfortunately, I'm not really gonna be able to capture it on camera. I ended up losing my GoPro, so I may just report back whenever we're all said and done and ready to send the file off to Brian. While not ideal losing my GoPro, I still wanted to film some data logging clips while driving. I set up my current camera on a tripod and placed it on my passenger seat. With data logging, you want a good mix of driving vary your speed, do some pulls in various gears. For the most part, I was just cruising some local back roads, and unfortunately, my camera eventually tipped over after hitting some gnarly bumps. Now I decided to ease into the throttle while rolling into first gear, and once the car hit boost, it effortlessly spun the tires until I let off a bit and it regained the traction. Later on, I did do a few highway pulls, and I was nothing but smiles. So I ended up getting a good mix of driving. We're roughly 14 minutes in, which I think is a solid amount of time for the tuner to dig into this and kind of figure out what's going on. So we are good to end this. We will go ahead and hit the X here. All right, saved like that. All right, now we're good to hook this up to the computer. Got the scanner back inside here. Now we just need to swap out cables. Very simple. Little tab, push on that, and that will release and remove this OBD2 cable. Then we need to simply switch to this cable right here. So we got this connector, which will go up top right here, like such. And then the other end is a USB. So on my computer, I only have a USB-C, so unfortunately I need an extra adapter, but it's pretty simple. So now we got this hooked up, it'll power up, and we just need to get to the saved files and get it onto the computer. Once the handheld device is properly hooked up to your computer, go ahead and go to efilive.com. Now this is on a Windows-based computer. I cannot confirm, nor did I, if this works on an Apple-based product, but I assume it does. Now, at this point in 2022, this is the newest option, the Download V8. If you see something higher up, I recommend clicking on that so you have the latest and greatest version. From there, go ahead and agree to everything you need to agree to, follow the prompts. Now for me, I'm just choosing to use most of the default settings as far as where it's saving everything to, but go ahead and click next, go through the process, let it run its course, and then click finish to finalize the install. Now that you have EFI Live downloaded to your computer, go ahead and open it up. With the handheld scanner attached, you should see some files at the bottom left window, and go ahead and click on Scan, and that is your list of data logs. Drag those to a folder somewhere on your computer, and that's what you'll use to email your tuner. In this case, I'm using Brian Blair from Vermont Tuning. So I whipped up a nice little email with the attached data log and sent it his way. After your tuner's had some time to review your data log, in response, they'll send you a new tune file that you upload to the handheld device. So at this point, reconnect the handheld device to your computer, open up EFI Live. If you remember the scan folder, once everything's hooked up, that is where the data logs are saved. You are taking something from the scanner, putting it on your desktop. In this case, we're taking something and putting it on a scanner. That needs to go into the tune folder. So from the email, I recommend saving the attachment the tuner sends you, save it on a folder on your desktop, then from that folder, drag it and drop it into this tune folder of the handheld device. From here, you need to disconnect the handheld device from the computer, change out the cords, remove the USB adapter cord, re-plug in the OBD2 cord into the handheld device, and from here, it's kind of back to step one. Plug the tuner into the car again via the OBD2 port, take that new tune, upload it to the vehicle, drive around in data log, save the file, send it back to the tuner, and you'll have this back and forth for a little bit, as long as it takes for the tuner and more importantly yourself to be happy with the performance of the vehicle. For your keen-eyed viewers, if you're wondering about the vent that is missing above the nav radio, well, I currently have it removed just simply because I've been tinkering with the sat-nav radio that you will see in an upcoming video. So that's going to wrap it up on today's video of tuning my 2008 Saab 9.3 Aero. More than pleased. I mean, I can't say enough things about how everything came together. I Frankensteined all of the bolt-ons together. A lot of good companies that I've worked with throughout the years to get to the point that I'm at. And if you're wondering, 355 horsepower, 420 pound-feet of torque is the estimate that Brian at Vermont Tuning said that we have for power. Now, with that being said, I did tell Brian from the get-go that I want a very conservative tune, so we're not shooting for the moon. This is one of my daily drivers. Now, at 355 horsepower in a front-wheel drive vehicle, this car gets some wicked torque steer. Now, I will say I may be replacing the rack and pinion here in the future. I did at one point do the tie rod ends, inner and outer tie rod ends, but some play still in the steering wheel, so that does have an effect on that. But the torque steer at 355 horsepower is pretty wild, and for a daily driver that is more than enough, so I'm extremely pleased. So I'm going to end the video here. If you're wondering where I'm at, well, it's one of my favorite places ever. I'm in a wreck Saab. That's not my favorite thing ever, because that does make me kind of sad to see another Saab off the road. But the actual location where this wreck Saab is, that's my local pick and pull junkyard. So this is one of my favorite things to do ever, is scour the junkyard, get some Saab junkyard gold. And well, if you want to see some of those videos, use the links in the description or click up top here for the video series on the Saab junkyard adventures. So I'm going to end it here. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you like it, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing, and I'll catch your friends on the next one.